missing someone.
Hey, this is Bond Diesel with another edition of Intel Insights. This time we'll be going over the set of recordings known as the National Guard recordings. We'll listen, we'll talk, we'll do the things that we always do. So without further ado, let's listen.
Understood. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I was in the dark zone when we pulled out. Yeah, I'm okay to talk about it. My name? Specialist Robert Armitage Jr., Army National Guard, New York, 42nd Infantry Division. Yes, ma'am, it's a mouthful. Electronics engineer, wife and 2 kids in Utica. Mobilized mid-December after the governor declared a state of emergency. We knew there was an outbreak. We didn't know of what. No, ma'am. My experience, they don't tell you those things unless you're relevant, and it wasn't. Not yet. Well, you join up, you pretty much give them leave to do whatever they want to you. When did I get to Manhattan? Early days, right after the outbreak. They mobilized us on the 7th, had us in transports to the city on the 8th. Quarantine was already coming down. It was weird as hell to be traffic going into Manhattan and not see anything coming out. People hadn't started dying yet, but already things were pretty shaky. Half the city was sick, and the other half didn't go to work because they were afraid of getting sick. Our initial orders were to liaise with Sarah and provide support. Build aid stations and help them set up those field hospitals. City policing we left to the civil authorities. Though they could see we were getting stretched pretty thin. But we built structures. We safeguarded supply drops, we handed out blankets and water bottles, and we held the line on the quarantine. Nobody was getting off the island. Not if we could help it. Had to shoot a few people who tried. I'm not proud of that. Then people started dying. For real dying. Not just old folks and kids. People were dropping dead in the streets. People dying in their apartments and nobody would find them for days. The hospitals, they were turning people away because they had nothing left. But that was okay, because Sarah had those mass treatment centers and they were going to be it. By that point, the cat was out of the bag on the smallpox thing. But we still had hope, you know? Sarah was going to beat this thing, and then we were all going to go home. Meanwhile, the city was falling to shit around us. The ATF, they were trying, doing their best during all this. Firemen, cops, crossing guards, you name it. All of them trying to keep things running when the water stops flowing and the lights start going out. And all you got is a badge and a promise that things are going to get better. People start getting crazy in the streets, stealing food, taking it from their neighbors. What are you going to do? After a while, they linked us up with them and called us all JTF. But it still wasn't enough. Early days, there was talk of hooking up with that PMC someone paid to guard their offices on Wall Street. Last Man Battalion, they were called. Complete bunch of shitheads. If they played ball, maybe things wouldn't have gotten so bad. But their CO, this Bliss asshole, he decides they're not working with nobody. So suddenly we got a war going with those guys while the disease is out of control. Not enough we got a superbug trying to kill us. Goddamn Merc's gotta try it too. But that's all besides the point. Because the real problem was those treatment centers. They failed. Everybody died. The patients, the doctors, the nurses. The poor sons of bitches dumping bodies into the mass graves they had to dig in Central Park. Everyone. People dying on the inside, people shooting at us on the outside. When they finally told us to pull out, it was a blessing. Except now, all that's behind barbed wire. Yeah. That's where your dark zone came from. And the things I've seen, I don't care how much you're offering. I'm never going back in.
I like this one because most of the information, I think really for the first 4 or 5 recordings, is kind of the general thing we've been hearing. We got called in, things were bad, things got worse, worse. What I like about this one is some of the detail about the LMB and how the original intent with the JTF was to work with them. The LMB being called in by the wealthy, by the Wall Street companies and stuff to protect all of their property and their holdings and all of that. Obviously, when things went super bad, there was the opportunity there to, hey, let's join up. The same way they combined the JTF and the National Guard, let's roll the LMB in here. Maybe we can really keep control of what's going on. Obviously, with what we know about Bliss, that wasn't really a thing, and he saw other opportunities. So then you realize that the conflict with the rioters, the cleaners, and the Rikers is just kind of like a by chance. The JTF's trying to keep them from taking over, from killing innocent people, all that. The difference between the conflict with those 3 groups and the conflict with the JTF and the LMB is that it's a war. It's mercenaries versus soldiers, federal soldiers, or however you want to look at it. So it makes that situation more interesting because, at least in my opinion, I think the idea of kind of what he says, that they're dealing with this disease, they're dealing with these kind of groups of people who are trouble, and now they're dealing with an organized military unit that they have to fight against in a more traditional war. And if you think about so much of the map that we get to play on, let alone the whole city, the LMB isn't just this somewhat organized group of soldiers. I mean, they have checkpoints, bases, vehicles, advanced armaments. I mean, they're no joke. They appear to be way better off than the JTF and the National Guard soldiers. The second part of this I really enjoy is this last one where he talks about Central Park, the Dark Zone, and how they have these mass graves up in Central Park. The things he's seen, he'll never go back no matter what you pay him. Just all those concepts. It makes me, I've been a big proponent of this, almost probably to the point of annoyance, but I still really want to see Central Park. And at this point in the game, at this stage, unless there's a surprise 1.9 patch with Central Park in it somehow, I think we've all kind of resigned the fact that maybe even at one point that was the plan, and things happened and it just wasn't able to happen or whatever. I would think that the 7, 8, and 9 DZs were always meant to be there, one way or the other. And the progression and awfulness that you see from DZ 1 through 6, you see 7 is worse, 8's even worse, and 9 is downright terrible, especially on the Central Park wall. If we never get to see Central Park, which I think may be the case, I think it's really kind of a bummer, because it seems like they were leading up with all the stories you've heard about Central Park from various people, that it was going to be a real disaster zone. Like, that it was really like as bad as like 7, 8, 9 seem, that would have even paled in comparison to what we would have seen in Central Park. These guys don't really seem like, they seem like they're all used to seeing lots of death and destruction and awfulness. But then when they talk about Central Park and the DZ, it's like even beyond their own comprehension, even when the rest of this stuff is fairly normalized. So I think it's interesting. You may disagree, but that's where I'm at with it. So that's all I really had for this edition. Like all the things, hit the buttons, check out the other stuff. I'll put a link to all of my other sources of content down in the description. Feel free to start a conversation or continue a conversation in the comments or over on Twitter. And until the next one, this is Bond Diesel.